Hello. Normally I would have an intro with some music and a description of what the story is about, but this is a special case. Today we're talking about not the story or much about the story, but just the opening arc of a manga that I really love, and that is I Am a Hero by Kengo Hanazawa. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Hello and welcome to Manga Mondays, the bi-weekly manga show this year where we talk about great and interesting manga you should check out. I'm your host, Vlogs, and again today we're talking about I Am a Hero, specifically the opening arc, about the first volume or so, before it gets into the zombie stuff. Just the opening stuff, some surreal sort of slice-of-life comedy. This is a manga I used to see the first omnibus of in Barnes & Noble for years before finally checking it out. Published by Dark Horse, a Western publisher, it existed in this Western manga sphere in Barnes & Noble and other bookstores for years before a lot of manga hit our shelves, and so I would see it for a long time. And it was big when zombie stuff was big. Hanazawa wrote this series from 2009 to 2017, where it sort of abruptly ended and fizzled out, following some spin-off manga and live-action stuff in its prime. And in my opinion, that's fine. It was a zombie manga, and like all zombie content from the early 2010s, it just did its thing for way too long until it was Walking Dead, then got cancelled. Except for, ironically, the Walking Dead TV show, which is somehow still going, like right now, actively. What's important about I Am a Hero, though, and what I seriously recommend you check out, is the opening arc. It's one of my all-time favorites, and the rest is okay. You see, a million zombie manga came out around this time, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about most of them. Except maybe High School of the Dead, because it was horny and got a dub. People still do talk about this, at least pretty fondly from what I can tell, and it's because, I would assume, of what it did right in the beginning. It was an interesting story before it was a zombie story. It had a really fun, lighthearted, grungy goofball tone with a main character you love to watch do stuff. Looking on the manga's wiki, you don't see a lot of reference to what it's about in the beginning, but when you read reviews of it or look it up online, most of the critics that are talking about it are talking about the beginning of it, and that's kind of the same way I talk about it when I'm talking about it to somebody else. I'm going to go ahead and get into the story and just talk about the beginning in total. I'll give you a nice breaking point if you don't want to get spoiled here after a little bit. So the story opens with Hideo Suzuki, the dude, opening up his apartment and dancing, eating curry, chilling with his TV, talking to his imaginary friend Yajima about the female newscasters he's watching. He's got way too many locks on the door. This dude's paranoid. His room is stuffed to the brim with manga. He's got to reach behind a shelf to turn the lights on. He's got no space, a little TV desk chair and microwave for his food setup. Heads to the bathroom before bed for a little nightly cleanup ritual. Got some girly pins holding his hair back because the dude is function over form. A punching bag with his coworker's face on it, and a bed on the floor. And that's it. A real bachelor's pad. Reminds me of my first house. You can see it all in this one shot. They do a lot of full room shots like this and it looks real cool. Suddenly, as he's watching this TV and eating dinner, his power goes off and he starts hallucinating. He grabs the radio, freaking out. That's dead too. He starts counting the seconds. He's praying. He pulls his favorite manga off the shelf to make a protection circle. Some books by the wacky mangaka Nagakawa Isami, who Suzuki says occupies a place far removed from fear. These are pretty funny books. Check some of these pictures out. There are some dry textbooks on there that are so serious he says they're almost funny. And some grade school yearbooks that he says are fair game because they're from a time of hope before high school and middle school. Finally, he grabs his fucking gun and sits in the protective circle to await his demise. He tells himself, I am a hero, signifying he's the main character in this story and he'll be the last one to die. As he sits there and waits, he flips through some books and sighs. He waits, he forgets about time, and before long, the power's back on. His morning news show comes back to life. He doubles over, says good morning. He survived the night, and he goes to sleep. He wakes up and says, I won! He starts gloating and yelling at the imaginary spirits. I'm a different person than I was last night. Come and get me. He punches his coworker's face on the weight bag and says, I'm not like you, calling him an idiot. He runs out the door, double checking the lock. This dude is paranoid. He is not ready for the worst, but he expects it. He's a little crazy and a young man living alone in the city sort of way. Okay, now I'm going to go on about the rest of the story, or this first arc of the story. If you want to skip spoilers, you can skip to the end. I'll put a timestamp here. If you want to read this for yourself, you can pretty much read all of it in 20 minutes. I'm talking about the first 8 chapters here. So Suzuki heads to work. As he walks in, we see the shoes piled up by the door. I love details like this. They feel so real. And Hanazawa does a great job with every environment he draws, but especially the indoor scenes. You can tell he's thought about every corner of the room. He's constantly drawing it from different angles. Full, panned out scenes like I was talking about earlier, just packed with details, packed with love. They all sit down, him and his coworkers, and get to work. Suzuki and the other mangaka. More specifically, they clean up others' work. There are 4 higher editors, that's basically all they do here in this room. But he loves doing it, he loves talking about it. There's some average banter between the mangakas about what's on TV, accompanied by shots of the office. The dude that Suzuki hates, his coworker, starts talking about female newscasters in the show Boob Morning, a morning show with big-breasted anchors. Suzuki tells him to shut up with that crap and starts ranting about the history of manga and what he believes makes it great, as this dude just rolls his eyes, his coworker. And this is obviously the author speaking from his heart. He says, a great manga will be remembered for 100 years, or 1,000 years, or forever. The point is, as time goes by, culture changes. And if despite that, the meaning of a work at its time still conveyed and has still stood the test of time and can be considered a masterpiece. His other decent coworker guy says the opposite. Manga is counterculture and stands against the period it was made in, only meaningful in that time. This makes Suzuki smile. He's happy to have a real conversation about this and talk about the work he does, or the work that he's interested in doing. So there's 3 guys. There's Suzuki, his cool coworker who's like this lanky dude, and then his kind of obese coworker that he hates. And then there's also a girl editor who just kind of keeps to herself. The dude that he hates speaks up and says, stop talking to yourself, I don't want to hear about your manga, put the TV on. They put the TV on just so he can talk about the anchor woman that he likes on TV. He laughs about some biting incident on TV, I wonder what that's about. And then he says to Suzuki, wow dude, you're 35 and talking to yourself? That must be embarrassing. I mean, he wasn't talking to himself, he was talking about manga to his coworkers, but Suzuki just laughs and says, I guess. Then the boss comes in. They've all been working together in that room for like 11 hours. You see the clock. He tells them to pack it up, head out, go home. As he walks home, Suzuki's talking to himself and he says, that guy's over 40, what is he telling me not to talk to myself for? Then checks his phone. And he smiles. His girlfriend Teko invites him over for a homemade Odin and beer. He starts dancing, trotting down the street, smiling, singing, Odin and beer, Odin and beer. He jogs up the stairs to her house. They meet at the front door. She gives him a hard time and they kiss through the mailbox before she lets him in. Their interactions are adorable. I'm not even going to try to do them justice, I'll just put some pictures on screen. Just know it's sweet and they're perfect for each other and they love each other, and this will take you like 20 minutes to read everything I'm talking about, so go do it and just get a lot out of it. Just look at this face, and this face, and this apartment shot. Man, it's nostalgic. They hang out here. She gives him a BJ. They talk about her manga studio where she just finished a new storyboard and they drink to celebrate. She gets drunk and tries to make him go get more beer, calling him a talentless idiot and go do something for his life. She gets angry when she's drunk and she really calls him out in his lack of accomplishments, which hurts him. He goes to the bathroom with her and takes her to bed, tucks her in, and then he goes to the bathroom and thinks about his future. He wants to make his own manga. He has a lot of ideas. He's made one before, but it's been a long time. He writes down some thoughts. Like everyone in this capitalist hell we work and live in, he's had no time to work on his own projects, and he's just been working for somebody else in a field adjacent, or maybe not even in what he loves. And he wants to do great things, but it just doesn't happen. It sucks. He has no time to do it. She wakes up, half awake, starts telling him about her senpai who's doing great things at her manga studio, and then says, don't embarrass me. And what did she mean by that? He looks at her books. As she falls back asleep, he notices she has every volume from her senpai in her manga studio, and only half of what Suzuki's published in a disheveled heap, not really organized. As they fall asleep together, he reads some from her bookshelves, and he can't believe it. It's so good, and it just makes him feel worse about his own stuff. The next morning, they wake up, they kiss, and he goes to pitch his own manga. He's dressed in designer clothes, confident in his outfits, feels like it gives him strength. He's kind of a nerd, like he knows a lot about clothes, he knows a lot about a few different brands and things that he's worked with so far, and you can tell he's like a studious guy. I mean, from his apartment to what he does, he feels like a real otaku. So he gets to the place to pitch his manga, and this place is super busy, it feels like a real hectic office, the walls covered in paper and drawings, and he starts talking to this interviewer guy about his new story, and it's going great. And everything was caught by the interviewer, and the interviewer is appreciating it in full detail. And then he wakes up, and the man is looking at him unimpressed. And he says the ideas are uninspired, and the main character has no presence. He tells Suzuki at 35 that his personality is only getting smaller and shrinking. And to have interesting ideas, he should lead a more interesting life and go do and experience new things. And Suzuki thinks about that, and then he tries to frantically explain what and why the story has more to it, that there's something here for him. But he can't convey his idea in a way that makes sense this frantically, and the man is unimpressed. Just then, a mangaka with crazy clothes and hair busts over from the next cubicle like a whirlwind, and he starts screaming and ranting about why he loves the story he just heard about. And he's like, Suzuki, we should go to a cabaret club together. Let's go hang out and have fun ideas. This is a chance for Suzuki to kind of like get out of his rut and go to this world the star lives in and kind of make friends in the industry. But Suzuki declines. He decides to go back to his part-time job instead. And the interviewer says to draw something else and try again, and Suzuki heads back home. On his way home, the mangaka who just yelled at him poked his head out of a taxi coming by. And he's like, hey dude, I have some more ideas about your story. Like, maybe if they're old men, they're like old men in this Moe period. And maybe this is happening. And he asks Suzuki to come talk about it in the taxi with him. And this is like one last chance for Suzuki to go do this thing. And he's like, nah, I get car sick, I can't come. And it sucks. It's really hard to watch this guy because he has this opportunity to make this happen, but it doesn't happen. So he goes to work, his part-time job. He heads home. On the way, he sees a girl get hit by a car and break her neck, and then she gets up and walks off, and that kind of freaks him out, and that's where this downward spiral of his life begins. He runs to Suzuki's house, and he tells her all about this. He's so scared, and then like she can't really help him. He's like all stressed, and she's like, it's got, like, I know you just saw this thing, but there's got to be more to it. What are you so stressed about? And he's like confessing his fear of her like fucking her senpai and like not being interested in him anymore. And she just like tells him to shut up and go home. And he runs home. He starts texting her in tears in his apartment, and he's like scared about his life, and he's really suddenly aware of where his life is going and what he saw, and he can't stand the silence. He's just texting her about everything, talking about when they first met, and you sort of get a flashback of their first time together, their initial hookup and date, and they met at the studio he's working at as an editor now, and she was more edgy at the time with cigarettes and leather and short hair. Big fan of his first book, and she encouraged him to work more on it, and he encouraged her back, and together they had something really nice, and they were moving together. But she grew up and out of it and moved on, and he didn't. He's still working there. The next morning, after this fight, he gets up and goes to work again, and he works a full day. His boss suddenly gets up, says it's time to go, and his hands are bleeding. All this editing at this pace for this many years is wrecking him. It hurts to watch. The Suzuki and the others ignore this, and he gets up, and there's blood in his chair. And it's like, it's just this awful warning of where his life is going. And so, what now? Does Suzuki get better, and does his life move on? Well, no, it shifts and becomes more of a zombie book. And from there, it's fine. I mean, I guess you could say he does go somewhere in the fact that he's sort of getting out of this rut in this zombie story, but it just kind of sucks. I would have liked to see more of this explored in that same medium. I mean, he's hallucinating, he's being a wacky dude, he's making some funny faces and doing some funny things. I don't know, I just felt like there was a ton of personality in this early arc, and I would have loved to see that as a full story by itself before it became the zombie story. And the zombie story is okay, but I don't know, I think it's worth talking about. I had a really good time reading it again. If you want to read this story, it's real short. It's like 8 or 9 chapters from where I was at, and I think it's a really enjoyable short story and read, and you should check it out. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and checking out our other videos. I have more manga recommendation videos every other Monday, and then we have our fanfiction podcast and some other interesting content coming up, so stay tuned. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram at the links below and above, and have a good day. Support your local bookstore. Support your friends. Have a good New Year. Thanks for watching. Again. Bye.